Ortiz, our colleague who is here supporting for technical assistance. And I'm so excited to have my fantastic friend and coworker, Ms. Patricia Williams, who's also going to be facilitating this workshop with us this morning. So we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves a little bit more to each of you. Again, my name is Stephanie Stolzenbach. I am the Director of Clinical Services for the Leadership Program and our sister organization, P2L, Pathways to Leadership. I am a social worker, and the majority of my work is really focusing on culturally responsive and equitable mental health services across the Department of Education school partners that we provide services and programming in. So I'm so fortunate to be with you all in this virtual space this morning for this really robust and important topic, as we're really thinking about expanding an equity framework within the work that we do in all of our many varied roles and organizations and settings. And I'm going to kick it over to Patricia and just let her also introduce herself to you all.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Patricia Williams, and I am the Community School Director at PS 327. And I have been with the Leadership Program as a part-time facilitator, and then I moved into the position Restorative Justice Coordinator, and I worked in other roles. As a Restorative Justice Coordinator, I had an opportunity to actually participate in some of this equity work. And I'm going to give some tips on some practical applications on some of the resources that you'll see within the slide. So just feel free to ask questions, and we'll follow along in that way. Thank you so much for allowing me to present for you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patricia. She's my go-to in this work. And we do a lot of facilitation together. So we're really looking forward to getting to know you all a little bit this morning and having a really interactive discussion. So I know many of you are writing, thank you again, your name and your organization in the chat. Also an invitation to share pronouns. Forgive me, I had forgot to mention that earlier. And maybe we could also just add another layer to our check-in this morning, which is if you were a color on this Tuesday morning, which color would you be today? Kind of how's your energy? How's your vibe? How are you feeling? And I just welcome folks to share the color as well as, again, your name and your org into our chat box. And we'll just kind of see where folks are at, get a little bit of a colorful temperature of the virtual space, if you will. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing yellow from Mariah, rainbow from Anna, yellow or pink from Melissa. Oh, purple for Royalty. I love that, Megan. Tara, also purple. Mint green. Oh, I love the neon colors. I would be clear. Oh, I love that, Gloria. Ready to adapt. Lavender, I'm seeing red, green, more pink, red for passion. Wow. Yellow and blue. Orange, just beautiful kind of visualization I'm getting from reading out loud some of these colors. So thank you, everyone. That gives us, I think, a good kind of rainbow spectrum for so many of you who are joining us this morning. I think my color is kind of like an orange, like a burnt orange color, kind of feeling like I'm getting a little bit more energized being with you all on this call already this morning. So thank you again. Please feel free to continue to share your thoughts and ideas there around color. And again, just some objectives for our conversation today. We're really thinking about wanting to expand and deepen our critical consciousness regarding the importance of equity, right, within education, be it daytime programming, be it after school programming, be it mental health and social work services, be it staff meetings with colleagues, right? All of the ways that we kind of find ourselves engaging as workers, as educators and youth development workers. So Patricia and I really wanted to just kind of showcase what we've been utilizing, kind of our tools and our toolbox, so to speak, our equity tools that we have found to be really useful when talking with our own staff internally, when talking with our Department of Education school partners, when talking with our young people about equity. So our hope today is that we're just going to kind of bring some useful ideas, quotes, poems, a few media clips, and also some kind of questions to use for some deep reflective work and thinking about this concept of equity within education, what that really means to you, to your role, and what that means to your young people and your staff that you work beside and that you serve. So we're, again, coming in to kind of share with you all what has been useful and helpful for us the past few years. And again, loving your comments, thoughts, and hearing also what your work has looked like as well, and learning from all of you together this morning. So we wanted to go ahead and start with an aim and a quote, which is really big in the work that we do at the leadership program, having kind of an aim and a quote to center and kind of ground our conversation. So for today, our aim is, how can I center and expand an equity lens within my teaching practices this year? And our quote here is from the incredible Lila Watson, who's a really famous activist and did a lot of work in Australia and New Zealand. And she writes that, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound with mine, then let us work together. So this is a really important quote, I think, for Patricia and myself. And we just wanted to open it up so you all this morning for general thoughts or reactions, what this quote maybe makes you think of, perhaps what's resonating for you this particular morning in regards to the quote. So I'll give folks a couple moments. I know we're just kind of getting our day going here, but thinking about this particular quote in our work for equity, within education. Thank you, Melissa. Working together. Yes, instead of coming in as the expert to give instruction. I love that. Thank you so much. So when I read that, I'm thinking of kind of like dismantling power dynamics, right, in the work that we do with our students. I love this from Lynn Cross. Thank you. In terms of color, right? And then thinking about every day offers new challenges where we need to work together to find new ways to view those challenges. Absolutely. And Zach is sharing here, helping build a stronger program from the foundation that has already been made. That's right. Meeting people where they're at, building together. Thank you, Tara. And Francine, not just seeing yourself in another person's place, but putting yourself into another's place. That's really, really powerful. Thinking about collective liberation, thinking about our own identities, our own kind of positionality, how we're kind of positioned within society is a big part of what we're going to be also talking about with you all this morning. So thank you so much for that. And Peter is also sharing here, not pretending you know what is truly going on, but trying to walk alongside it and learn. Absolutely. Letting students really kind of bring their voice to these conversations, as Rena is sharing with them, express how they feel, what they're going through. And also for us white folks doing this work, folks like myself, also kind of letting go of this white savior complex, I think is an important one, especially in my own kind of self journey in this work for several years. So I just wanted to kind of also include that in our conversation this morning, right? Fantastic. So I'm also going to go ahead and share with you all this poem that we utilize a lot in equity-based trainings. This is one that is a favorite of Patricia and mine, called Invitation to Brave Space by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. And this is a poem that can be really grounding for staff and for students when having kind of difficult conversations, right, that need to be had. And so I would love just to read this aloud to all of you and then ask for feedback around words or phrases that are really resonating for you today. So here we go. Invitation to brave space. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds in this space. We seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Mickey Scott Bay Jones is a fantastic author and poet and activist, and did a lot of work after the 2016 election with something called 100 Dinners. And so that's how this poem kind of came my way. And we hope that this can be maybe useful to all of you moving forward as well. But thinking about this concept of creating and inviting ourselves to brave space for our conversation this morning. So I'm not sure if folks want to maybe type in a word, a phrase that's kind of standing out to you this morning. And we'll just kind of see where folks are at. Thanks, Tiffs. Tiffany's writing their safe space. Yeah, this poem is really asking us to consider the differences there, perhaps, right? And what might be called brave versus what might be called safe, right? Zach, side by side, right? Thank you. And Melissa, the first word that caught her eye is invitation. Inviting tells me I'm wanted somewhere in this vast world. Oh, it's really powerful. Sometimes you can feel alone or unwanted, right? So it kind of pulls us in more. Mariah, we will not be perfect. We have the right to start somewhere. Thank you, Peter. Space, the word space, thank you so much. We amplify voices. Camille, amplify voices, thank you for that. And Glory's also naming kind of safe space, standing out to her. Anna, loving the message on invitation, right? And Lynn, we will not be perfect, and the word together. Yeah, so thinking about calling each other, right, as Carmen is saying, to more truth, more love, examining what we think we know from Donovan. Shantae, imperfection, brave. Cindy, we all carry scars. Thank you so much, everyone. And I encourage you all to kind of continue to share. And we think that this is something that's really a great place to begin to generate conversation around equity, on power, race, oppression, and privilege, all of these really necessary and important conversations. And that bravery, right? I think acknowledging that it takes courage, right, to kind of step into or sit in, right, our virtual spaces that we've been living in for 9 months, but really thinking about the importance of managing discomfort for the work that we do for ourselves, right? For many of us, there's personal connections to this topic, and for our young people, right? They deserve it, right? Our discomfort, right? Is manageable and tolerable when we're in service to our young people in our schools. So we hope that this can be useful to all of you, again, moving forward in furthering your conversations after today. And Patricia and I also really love setting up community agreements or community commitments, covenants, all of the words that you can utilize in this exercise. What we're sharing today are a few that have been developed and adapted by AORTA, which is the Anti-Oppressive Resource and Training Alliance. We went ahead and put their website in there, and they are just such a fantastic resource. And I had heard about this organization from a few of my colleagues. And so we're pulling these agreements that are kind of a play on some of maybe the typical agreements that you've come across in the work that you've been doing and that you continue to do. So I'll just go ahead and read these for us. And if there's others that we'd like to consider, please feel free to share your thoughts. So the first one here is one diva, one mic, kind of playing on the traditional one mic agreements in a little bit more of a playful manner. Again, just respecting whoever is speaking in any given moment. The second one here is no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. So thinking about the power of the collective knowledge and experience that lives in workshops such as this. The next one here is speak from your own perspective and experience, really bringing your own truth into what you're sharing with us and with others. And this next one I really love, move up, which is a little bit of a play on step up, step back, or flow in and flow out. That's a little bit more kind of action oriented for all folks involved. So maybe moving up is if you've been maybe more quiet, maybe moving up into more of a speaking position, or if you're maybe someone you're finding yourself speaking a lot, maybe it's kind of moving up into a little bit more of like a listening stance. So that's kind of what that's alluding to. The next one here is we just can't be articulate all the time, right? We worry sometimes, our words might be messy, or we might kind of stumble over our thoughts. We might not have a full, complete thought ready to go, and just realizing that that's okay, that we're human beings, that we can't always verbalize necessarily exactly what we're feeling, and that's okay. Thinking about being aware of time, again, just in terms of our ability to be speaking and sharing. Embracing curiosity, kind of always coming from that place of curiosity has really served me well in my facilitation work and my own conversations with staff and with social work interns, having these conversations like we're having today. And then lastly, acknowledging the difference between intent and impact, and thinking about how even good intentions, right, don't necessarily outweigh harm or perhaps negative impact that's been caused by a comment or a statement, and just kind of being able to think through that and really just kind of, again, bring that acknowledgement and that awareness. So we hope that these can kind of guide our short time together today and potentially can be useful to you all moving forward. And our next resource is a really fantastic video from YouTube from Prince Ah. Patricia, forgive me, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
EA is enough.
Thank you so much. He has this really powerful video that we're going to go ahead and show as a group and view together called I Sued the School System. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and pull up the video through my browser. Forgive me, I was having difficulty this week embedding this particular video into my slides. So just one moment. I'm going to go ahead and get that all set up for us. Okay. Do you see that, Patricia? The video?
Yes, I see it.
Awesome. Thank you.
It once said, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots, do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish? Swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it. Proceed. Exhibit A. Here's a modern day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today, and here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Well, get this. Here's a classroom of today, and here's a class we used 150 years ago. Now, ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? But with evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past? I did a background check on you and let the record show that you were made to train people to work in factories, which explains why you put students in straight rows, nice and neat, tell them sit still, raise your hand if you want to speak, give them a short break to eat, and for 8 hours a day, tell them what to think. Oh, and make them compete to get an A. A letter which determines product quality, hence grade A of meat. I get it. Back then, times were different. We all have a past. I myself am no Gandhi. But today, we don't need to make robot zombies. The world has progressed. And now we need people who think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, with the ability to connect. See, every scientist will tell you that no two brains are the same. And every parent with 2 or more children will confirm that claim. So please explain why you treat students like cookie cutter frames or snapback hats, giving them this one-size-fits-all crap. Watch your language. Sorry, Your Honor. But if a doctor prescribed the exact same medicine to all of his patients, the results will be tragic. So many people would get sick, yet when it comes to school, this is exactly what happens. This educational malpractice, where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant should not be acquitted. This may be one of the worst criminal offenses ever to be committed. And let's mention the way you treat your employees. Objection overruled. I want to hear this. It's a shame. I mean, teachers have the most important job on the planet, yet they're underpaid. No wonder so many students are short-changed. Let's be honest. Teachers should earn just as much as doctors, because a doctor can do heart surgery and save the life of a kid, but a great teacher can reach the heart of that kid and allow him to truly live. See, teachers are heroes that often get blamed, but they're not the problem. They work in a system without many options or rights. Curriculums are created by policymakers, most of which have never taught a day in their life. Just obsessed with standardized tests. They think bubbling in a multiple choice question will determine success. That's outlandish. In fact, these tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned, but don't take my word for it. Take Frederick J. Kelly, the man who invented standardized testing, who said, and I quote, "These tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we continue down this road, the results will be lethal. I don't have much faith in school, but I do have faith in people. And if we can customize healthcare, cars, and Facebook pages, then it is our duty to do the same for education, to upgrade and change and do away with school spirit, because that's useless. Unless we're working to bring the spirit out of each and every student, that should be our task. No more common core. Instead, let's reach the core of every heart in every class. Sure, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Let's give every gift an equal chance. I know this sounds like a dream, but countries like Finland are doing impressive things. They have shorter school days, teachers make a decent wage, homework is non-existent, and they focus on collaboration instead of competition. But here's the kicker, boys and girls. Their educational system outperforms every other country in the world. Other places like Singapore are succeeding rapidly. Schools like Montessori, programs like Khan Academy, there is no single solution. But let's get moving, because while students may be 20% of our population, they are 100% of our future. So let's attend to their dreams, and there's no telling what we can achieve. This is a world in which I believe, a world where fish are no longer forced to climb trees. I rest my case.
Thank you, everyone. For bearing with me as I'm toggling between my screens here. I'm going to go ahead and put our slides back up and go ahead and pass our virtual mic to Patricia to talk a little bit about the particular video.
Okay, so again, good morning. And the reason why I found this video to be so profound in the work that I started at a school that I worked at in the South Bronx. I was a restorative justice coordinator at that school for 2 years. And I had the opportunity to work with the most amazing 10th grade students in this work. And it kind of stumbled upon it by accident, actually. I was really charged to really work with the teachers and the admin staff. But however, again, how things got shifted was they wanted us to start working with this group of 10th grade students so we could kind of bring them up and change the school culture with the younger grades. So I started them off with this video just to have a conversation about the different things that they noticed in the educational system and the things that they said were unfair and the things that they wanted to challenge, but they didn't actually have language or words for it. So this just was a beautiful opportunity to highlight some things in this video. And I'm going to share some of the points that they made. Prince EA, he is a social media influencer and he's a poet, and he comes out with a lot of anti-racist work. He recently has a new video that's out, and you could just actually Google him and you'll see like some of his work about how he charges racism and how he charges systems and how we deal with these oppressive systems and how we are navigating in them as people of color or Black people, Black and brown people. And the kids were, they had it had a profound effect on them. They didn't realize that they were part of such a system. They just assumed like, this is just regular, this is school, this is what our life is. And then they realized that, you know what, things can be different if we really try to unpack it. So we took the opportunity to unpack this particular video. And this is such a conversation piece, not just with the students, but it was with some of the adults and some of the admin once I shared it. One point that I wanted to make was that they talked about the evolution of education. Like they were so shocked at how things were in the past, or how they were still the same when at the time when they were at this school. So I would definitely encourage folks to come up with processing questions and work with your students and work with the people around you, your colleagues in this way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patricia. I think this is something that we also utilized for our internal staff training for our part-time leadership trainers who facilitate after-school programming. And it was such a rich dialogue that we had with them last year when we were all in person. Feels like forever ago, right?
Yes.
But I think also for adults and for staff members, it can be, again, another really robust conversation generator.
And this is another visual that I use with my students to kind of give them, because again, like I said, everyone is, they could be auditory learners, they could be visual learners. So this was a pic that I actually use. I'm currently, again, a community school director at PS 327 in Brownsville, all day, every day. I love my school, and I've been there for the last going into now 4 years. And I work with the pre-K to the 5th grade students. So I figured, how was I going to bring this work to help my little ones understand what certain concepts were? So we have regular conversations about equity and equality and liberation. So what it is, I have these pics in my office. So when we're having conversations and we're having difficulties, and yes, I do restorative circles with my kids. I have a whole wall, and Stephanie could attest to this, that in my office, I have this huge wall with all these different things to help the kids really understand. So when we talk about equal, when we say equal, what we're talking about is giving everyone the same. So when we talk about this concept, bear with me, everyone, because I'm having a few difficulties myself. When we talk about sameness, that means we're giving everyone the same thing, not really taking into account is the same going to help everyone in the equation. And as you can see in the boxes to the left of the screen, you can actually see, well, everyone does have one box, but can everybody see over the fence is the question. So that is something that is very relatable for the younger kids, that they can actually see what that actually looks like. And versus the other concept of equity. When we talk about equity, we talk about what's just. So what will work for one person may not work for the next person. Again, that idea of one size fits all. We can't have a one size fits all when we're all very different and individual and unique people. So this is something that was able, again, you can see how everybody can see over the fence now because we have one person that can actually stand over and see. We have the one child that's on a smaller box, and we have the little bitty one on the second box. And my little ones love that, by the way, because now they feel like that we all have a voice. But then I want to get to a very poignant point of the workshop where we talked about our first quote from Lila Watson, where we talk about liberation in education. As you can see on the bottom one, on the right-hand side, you see that there is no fence. There's no boundary for anyone. So in my mind, like when I would have my students talk about or have this conversation, they basically was like, that means they're free. That means that there is no limit to what can happen for them. So when we talk about the boundaries, we talk about the boxes, and we talk about what it is just to have just complete, everyone just have complete access or all access. So this pick is very poignant, especially when you're working. It works with the older kids, but it's definitely wonderful working with the little ones because they have a really particular idea on what it means. And they can have these conversations using their language and their particular words to kind of articulate what their thoughts are as it relates to having an idea of equity, equality, and liberation in education. And it's wonderful to hear them speak in this way because we give them the language, but we also give them the ideas that they could visualize to see on what it actually looks like.
I love that so much, Patricia, that the little ones are understanding these concepts like at their tender ages, right? And we know that young people can have conversations that are deep and rich and powerful. And I love that we're kind of deepening and furthering our thoughts and our reflection, right? Thinking about what does liberation, what could that be, right? Like really imagining and dreaming about a world of which there is collective liberation. And I think our young people are just so full of rich ideas in this capacity. So wonderful. I wanted to share too, we've also utilized these infographics with our own internal colleagues and staff members and thinking about, as adults, we're kind of, our brains are a little bit more wired in a certain direction, but having just really meaningful conversations around like, what does liberation look like within after school programming, right? Within staff meetings, within trainings, within our organizational structures. And I think can be really useful for all of us who are on the call today, right? Just like we're talking about now, like what is liberation really, like how would we define that? And I love the visual, again, as Patricia was highlighting for the liberation infographic on the right, that wall is down. So for me, that really is symbolizing that those systemic, structural, institutional barriers are no longer in anyone's way, right? And thinking about how do we kind of disrupt and dismantle systemic challenges right now, right? In December 2020, moving into the next year. So there's a lot to kind of, I think, ponder and reflect on after today's conversation, certainly.
And Stephanie, can I just jump in real quick with something else as it relates to when we're doing our programming and thinking about those things in a very processing kind of way? So I work for the 21st Century Program. That's my grant. And basically, we take these things into consideration when we're coming up with our special accommodation plans for students with special needs. So that's where some of this also where our work falls into play, like our practices and what we do, because what we do for a group of kids may not be the same thing with what we do for maybe 5 or 6 that deal with special needs. So I think I want people to keep that in mind, that there's a very practical way that we can use this in our work, and a very procedural way that it can all come to play as we're moving forward with our students.
Thank you so much for that, Patricia. I just wanted to also share how powerful Francine's comment is here in the chat too, thinking about this notion of liberation, right? How important taking care is. And I think moving beyond, right, kind of that individualized way of thinking about care is like self-care. And that was a big part of my training as a social worker. And thinking about just in my own growth, the importance of collective care and communal care. So I'm thinking of that as I'm reading your comment there. So thank you so much, Francine. Just for time, kind of moving us along a little bit, we wanted to share this, what we thought was a really powerful infographic from Castle, who's kind of one of the leading experts in the realm of social and emotional learning. And a lot of their work the past 8 months has been really pivoting to think about what is transformational social and emotional learning. And really, if we were to kind of put that into one word, it would be equity. Or an equity lens, because everything that we do truly in after school education, social work kind of comes from this foundation of social and emotional learning. So we wanted to go ahead and share this infographic, allowing us to consider is shifting our focus from, which was in the center there, such a big emphasis on the purple area, which is students' social and emotional skills, mindsets, and academic learning. And kind of the small slivers that you see behind that, which were classroom factors in the green, school and district systems and policies in that orange layer. And then in the teal blue is societal context. So everything was pretty disproportionate, with a really big emphasis on young people primarily in that first kind of smaller circle. So what they're asking us to consider, I think, which is crucial, and what I think a lot of us are doing, is really shifting to a more balanced view, right? As you see in this closer up circle, where certainly we're still focused on our young people, but as importantly, and as even more so in some respects, our focus also has to be on these other layers, right? Having a more even balance, looking at classroom factors such as adult beliefs, mindsets, and behaviors. Right? Think about who we are in this work and how that is impacting equity in our service delivery. And then certainly continued emphasis on school systems and policies, and of course, our societal context. So we thought this is a really helpful infographic, and thinking about for ourselves that this conversation on equity is not like a one and done, as we all know, right? It's a journey, and it's a constant navigation, we feel, of thinking about inner ourselves, other, our young people, our colleagues, our coworkers, and then that important outer layer, right? Which is our context, our current context of socio and political context, but also our historical context, and how we are all positioned within all of these different systems, history, in different layers of society, and how crucial that is to our conversations around equity. So we wanted to share a little bit of one of our favorite thought leaders, as I'm sure she is for many of you as well, the incredible Kimberly Crenshaw. And what she's asking us to consider in her research and her work around intersectionality, and thinking about the multiple identities that we hold and that our young people hold. And so the quote that I have here on the right under her photo is that this idea that we all have the same life is false, right? Race, class, gender come together to shape the life chances of people in very different ways. So Patricia and I talk a lot about really seeing ourselves first and foremost. That self-awareness is crucial. And then really truly seeing one another and our young people, our multiple identities, and how they impact us as people in the world, how we navigate life, how our multiple identities kind of come together and intersect in different ways. So Kimberly Crenshaw's, a lot of her research, as we know, was around the intersection of gender and race, and a lot of her work as a Black woman that she has gifted us with. And so we're thinking about this notion of social identities, kind of all of these identities that society kind of ascribes to us, maybe not how we like would self-identify. Society sees me as, a white woman. I see just myself as sometimes just a mother and a stepmom, for example, a social worker. We really want to consider who we are in this work. And I think that self-awareness piece is really huge. So one of the resources that we've utilized and continue to really look at together in our work is our social identities. And thinking about, this is one example of a social identity wheel that will also be sent out to all of you on the call today in case you'd like to utilize this further for yourself or with your staff, or again, with your students. So we're really kind of considering in this work the inner layer right now, ourselves, and having just deep self-awareness and reflection. So we offer this as a tool and a resource. It's just for maybe a few moments wherever you're at right now, whether you're at home, on the train, wherever you're at listening. What are some of the social identities perhaps that exist for yourself? And of those identities, this morning, because this kind of changes with life in different situations, but today on this Tuesday, which of those are like the most important or the most salient to you right now in your life? And so I just want to give a few moments to let folks kind of reflect just with yourself. We won't be sharing this out in any breakout rooms or anything like that quite yet, but just wanting you to think about a little bit of a pause and like, what's coming up for me? What is most salient this morning? So I'm just going to give folks maybe about 2 minutes. I will stop talking. Just let you all think through that a little bit for yourself, and we'll come back together. Maybe we'll take another 30 seconds. I know you're probably thinking, wow, Steph, that's no time at all. But hopefully this is something you can keep thinking through again after today's session. Okay, well, thank you so much. Again, this is just an exercise where we're thinking about for ourselves, right? The reality that we all hold multiple identities. We're kind of these are a lot of the things that we're kind of asked to check off in little boxes. Oftentimes, what you see around this wheel here, right? Thinking about age, class, gender, sexual orientation, race, things like that, legal status. And again, Kimberly Crenshaw is really inviting us to consider the intersections of all of these multiple identities and what that means for our life. Um, and the hope here is that we can kind of ponder that for all of us, we often hold both privileged and marginalized identities, right? And that shapes the uniqueness of our own path in life in so many respects. And if we can kind of further that, that is also true for the young people of which we serve in the work that we do. And really thinking through issues of like power, privilege, subjugation, marginalization, some of those topics that are really big in the field of social work and education, and that are really so present and right at everywhere we look most days, right, with the current political climate that we're living through. And so I don't know if folks feel comfortable in the chat if there's one identity that's really salient for you. Just an invitation. Again, no pressure at all. This is a very personal exercise. But what we do tend to realize in going through with more time is that oftentimes the identities that are the most salient, the most sacred and special, the most important are oftentimes identities that we hold that feel like they're under attack, or that or maybe we feel oppressed in certain ways by some of the identities that we hold within the greater society. So thank you. I'm seeing here from Awal, faith/health and wellness. Thank you for including that in the chat. Something that's really salient for you and part of your identity, right? Thank you for that. I know for myself, it changes, but for me, gender is one. Identify as a woman, and so I just feel like that's an identity that I think a lot about. And I don't think what's on here is marital status. I am not legally married, but in a domestic relationship for about 11 years, and so sometimes there's a little bit of like side eye, like, oh, you're not married. And there's kind of like that look, that stigma, that bias kind of coming my way. But you have children. Are you going to get married? Whether that's from my mom or from, others in the society when I'm doing my taxes. So that's one thing that, comes up for me. And it can just be a really useful tool in thinking through, what's impacting me? How am I walking through the world? So we hope that that's something that you can go back and reference.
And also, I'll just quickly share. So since Stephanie was being transparent, I know for me, it's always the intersectionality of just being a Black woman and some of the day-to-day, and then also just being a Black woman in a position of leadership can also be a very challenging thing. So as we understand, like, we have so many multiple identities that, like, again, like she said, it could either be something that you feel like a sense of privilege or a sense of being marginalized. And we usually kind of lean on the side where you feel like you're getting the side eye, as Stephanie just said. Like, you may get the side eye if your hair changes. I'm a big hair person, so I'm always changing the hair. And any woman of color or Black woman, we change that hair regularly, and it's something different. So it's kind of like, wow. So then you get that, and then some days like, oh my gosh, your hair. Oh my gosh, your hair. So I feel like sometimes all of those things are, like I said, they're good and they're bad, but I think also it gives us an opportunity to take a step back and take a look and see how our social identities impact the people we work with. So I think it just gives us that moment to take a breath to see, okay, this is who I am in this context. And how are they perceiving me in the context? So I always am very aware. Stephanie and I have these conversations on a regular basis about this. And we have really, really in-depth conversations and talks about literature and different work that she's going to also introduce towards the end of the presentation. And I would urge everyone just to take an opportunity and take a look at that. And then it just gives you a different lens on not just the people that you work with, but actually a different lens on yourself and how your identities change over time as you're beginning to be influenced by the things that are around you. So I just open everyone for that invitation also.
I love that. Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, it's I think when we're thinking about equity, right, again, it's about that self, inner, other, outer, and being able to really continually reflect in this lifelong journey. So thank you for that offering to all of us. I'm sure many of us are familiar with this quote by the incredible Rita Pierson, who has since left us here on earth, but leaves us with such a powerful legacy in her role as an educator. And so she shares this quote with us, which is, every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best they can possibly be. So I think that's an invitation and a reminder for all of us. She also has a fantastic TED Talk where she speaks this quote into existence, if you will. That can be a really wonderful thing for a staff meeting as well. And we want to take a few moments here as we think about equity, as we think about creating equitable spaces, thinking just for a moment of maybe calling our own elders into our virtual Zoom space. Who has really impacted us, be it a family member, a mentor, an educator, maybe perhaps someone deceased or alive, who's had an impact on us in this theme of equity, who has really, who has bared witness to what our needs were as young people or as adults, and who worked diligently to meet those needs, right? To understand that we all don't just need the same thing, as Patricia was talking about, right? We all have unique needs and we have to get those things met. So we just wanted to invite folks just for a few moments here into the chat, if you'd like to type their name and maybe one or two qualities about them that most impacted you. Perhaps they made you feel really valued, or you felt just really seen, like really heard by this particular individual or group of people. We just give another invitation to share, and again, kind of bring them into this space. And I will share, this is an Indigenous practice of which I am borrowing and utilizing in our conversation today. So I wanted to name the history of this exercise. It is not a leadership program exercise, but certainly something that we have found to be useful and helpful in thinking through all of those who have impacted our hearts, our minds, and our souls, and for many of us have led us into the work that we do now. And Patricia had wrote there that they believed in her completely. That's so powerful, right? That kind of endless, constant belief and confidence that she felt from her elder. I love that. And Melissa, thank you for sharing. Ms. Noel, previous supervisor. She was above the age of 60 and so dedicated to the work. Karen is sharing her grandmother. Anna is sharing, Anna, my grandmother was a cook. She cooked with passion, did it with grit and hard work. Love that. Francine, one of her high school teachers, wow, were Holocaust survivors, as were my parents. Wow, and they all had the qualities of perseverance. Peter, his youth leader, forgive me, Jeffrey Moss, did everything he could to have me prove to myself that I have no limits when I choose to move. That's really powerful. Thank you. Awal, Jesus Christ, yes, gave his life for me and allows me to call him friend. So powerful. My parents as well, their qualities of survival, from starting off as sharecroppers in the deep South to property owners. Thank you for that. Wow. So powerful reading these aloud. Camille sharing her father, humble, kind, and wise. And he always said, you can get more bees with honey than vinegar. Oh my gosh, I love that. Hasim is sharing John Petiano, an old after school counselor I had. He was always pushing me forward. He was always busy and working, but still made time for the youth. That's what I admired about him the most. Wow, this is so powerful. Taylor is sharing my dad, who's a big inspiration to myself and others, welcomed everybody. Oh, he claimed everybody was his children. That's so endearing and had a huge heart. Megan is sharing my grandfather, who had loyalty, honesty, and faith in me. Wow. Mario Zempelli. Thank you, Megan. This is just beautiful to hear. So many names and qualities of those who've impacted you. And I think, who knows, right? The power that we have in the roles that we play with our different organizations, right? That we have the opportunity to maybe be named by a student if they were ever asked to do this exercise, maybe years from now, right? I think about that sometimes. It's not what we say, right? It's how we make people feel. So thank you. I think we're very privileged to have you all share such personal names and qualities. So thank you for that. A lot of the qualities that were listed are so powerful, right? And something that we wanted to also highlight comes from the Search Institute. And I think a lot of what was named here is about the power of the relationships, and what Rita Pearson shared there in her quotes, the power of relationships that are ones grounded in a co-partnership, perhaps, with young people. And so we really love this framework. We have kind of like 1, 2, 3, because it's like 5 buckets, if you will, that they offer us. And what's really cool about this framework, it can be utilized, it's research-based, evidence-based, and it can be utilized in any sector, any industry. So not just in education, but also in like healthcare clinics and settings, certainly in juvenile justice settings. They've done some work with this framework. What am I missing here? After school programming, and the list goes on and on. If you were to do just a kind of a quick Google search of developmental relationships framework, and you'll see again these buckets, which are expressing care, show me that I matter to you, challenging growth, push me to keep getting better, providing support, help me complete tasks and achieve goals, sharing power, treat me with respect and give me a say. And then expanding possibilities, right? Connecting me with people and places. I love this. I think if we were to focus, on each of these areas, we realize that that's a lot of the way that we approach our young people. And I love it, just so intentional and so easy to kind of read. I think the one that for Patricia and I that stands out often is the sharing power. And again, our umbrella today of equity, right? Thinking about inviting our young people's voice into decision-making, into program design, into the clubs that are offered, for example. How are we allowing a sharing of power to occur with the young people that we serve based on, right, their preferences and their identities? So we love this framework, and particularly, again, the sharing of power.
I also wanted to jump in real quick.
Yeah,
what I noticed in the work, when you're working as a community school director and you work with the entire building of people, so it's not just the teachers, the student, it's the entire community. And what I find is that the concept of sharing power, it can be a little difficult to relinquish that if you're working with younger students, and just having an understanding that everybody has a say and a voice. I find that has been such a challenge for, I believe, some of the adults in the space. to understand what that actually looks like. Like sharing power doesn't look like a child telling you what to do, but it actually just looks like we're all giving each other an opportunity to talk about how to make the community as one. So I just wanted to really stress that, because I know that I know in working with in some of these spaces, it's been like, well, I'm not going to let kids tell me what to do. I'm like, well, no, you're not telling them what to. They're not telling you. Excuse me, not telling. They're not telling you what to do. They're expressing where they're at, and it's our, and with the skill sets that we have to have the opportunity to kind of meet people where they're at. So I just think that that is a very important point to highlight, that the sharing of power means that we are actually listening to all the voices in the space, whether it's a 3-year-old's voice all the way up to the principal's voice. So that, I think, is something that I just want to make that point really poignant as we're moving forward, doing programming, working with our staff, that we have these conversations and try to have them in a very, a open, very brave, safe space, if I would be so bold to say that.
Yes, that's so important, right? Thinking about how we are reframing this notion of sharing power, that might be needed for some folks who might interpret that as like, wait a minute, like you're saying, like, I'm not going to let a child tell me what to do. Well, let's have a conversation, let's really unpack what this means. So thank you for that. That's so real. I'm sure that's resonating for a lot of you who are implementing programming right now and having a lot of decision making to do, a lot of ways to think about funding for next year, and you're already kind of in that brainstorming place. So this is a kind of a really, I think, hopefully timely topic. And again, they go on to really speak around, again, this is the Search Institute, our reference here, but they invite us to think about how do these kind of developmental relationships connect with equity. So the second bullet point here, when the developmental relationships framework is used with intentionality, we make room to broaden our world lens and recognize that multiple realities can simultaneously exist. And this means that we are taking the time to genuinely build connections and learn about one another. So we really love that, and we hope that that can be a useful tool for you and your staff potentially. And what's really cool about this infographic is it has like those 5 buckets, and then it breaks it down for us and gives us actions that fall under these 5 red buckets. And then definitions of those actions. And I think that's like super helpful for myself. I utilize this framework when I am talking with social work interns about engagements, even though they're in the realm of mental health, but how applicable this is when building anti-racist and anti-oppressive mental health relationships with students, right? So I love that it kind of really breaks it down, because it can sound kind of lofty, like, okay, I can express care, cool, I can provide support, but then giving us the actions and then the definitions, we hope can also be utilized for you all moving forward. And now we're moving into one of our favorite authors and activists. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the incredible Bettina Love. She has several books that she's authored. This is the most recent book, from my current understanding. We Want to Do More Than Survive: Abolitionist Teaching in the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. Highly, highly recommend this book. Maybe add that to your holiday wish list, or just gift it to yourself to take a look at over the winter break. I think this book is a must read for all of us doing anything with young people, no matter what your title and what your role is. So Patricia and I were really moved by this book, by this work. Bettina Love talks a lot about her own experiences as a young Black woman growing up in Rochester, New York, teaching down in Miami-Dade, Florida, and then now her current work as a researcher and educational activist. And so in chapter 3 of this particular book, I don't want to give a whole spoiler alert, but Bettina asked us to consider the work of the incredible bell hooks and what bell hooks described as a home place. So I wanted to go ahead, or I'm sorry, we wanted to go ahead and share this definition and just ask us to consider for ourselves this concept. So I'm going to go ahead and read from the book directly. Described by bell hooks, home place is a space where Black folks truly matter to each other, where souls are nurtured, comforted, and fed. Home place is a community, typically led by women, where white power and the damages done by it are healed by loving Blackness and restoring dignity. She argues that home place is a site of resistance. Understanding the gutting of dark communities' home places is critical to a teacher's analysis of the community in which he or she teaches. So that's I know it's a really powerful piece here from Bettina Love, and we felt it was really important to offer and bring that into our workshop today. As we think about equity, as we think about creating home places, and thinking about if we've ever experienced a home place ourselves as a youth growing up. And perhaps many of those elders that we called into this space also created that feeling, be it a physical home place or an emotional home place. But we did want to just kind of encourage us to think about this concept as relates to the work that we do as educators, and really wanting to highly recommend that book if you haven't yet. It's a wonderful one, maybe even for like a book club with your staff. And next we're just gonna go, it's just a little bit of an alert, breakout groups. I know some people love them, others don't. But we're just gonna be there briefly, maybe about 5 minutes, and wanting to kind of offer this question to talk about with maybe just groups of 5. Danny is gonna help us, our amazing colleague, in setting up the breakouts for all of you. We wanted in the groups to consider this question. Again, these are coming from Castle. They're transformative guiding questions for educators. In this 4th question here, I just wanted to spend a few moments in breakouts considering what are the relevant similarities and differences in your lived experiences and those of your students or participants. And perhaps what are some historical or contextual and personal factors that help to explain this. So it's again kind of moving from inner to other, thinking about our young people and ourselves in this work. You know, what kind of stands out to you as commonalities, and then what is very present maybe as some differences, thinking about our own personal identities in those of our students. So again, we're just gonna do like a random, about 5 or 6 people with Danny's support. And probably in a few moments, you'll get an alert and you can join a breakout group. And then we'll see you back here in just a few minutes.
Okay, I'm going to wish you all away.
Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Danny.
Anytime. And Trisha left by accident.
Oh, okay.
And I know some people are still in the room, and I understand that we might be multitasking. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I figured that may happen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. All good.
Okay.
People are juggling a lot right now.
Mhm.
Danny, I'll try to wrap up by like 11:25
Okay.
so that there's time for like the attendance again and then the evaluation link. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Okay, Steph, 5 minutes are done and everyone should be back now.
Danny, yeah, let's close the breakouts if folks. Okay, we're back now.
Yes.
Like, awesome. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was just kind of fun to connect. I'm sorry that was so brief. But for time, we're just going to go ahead and keep it moving, as I'm realizing we just have about 9 minutes or so before evaluation and attendance time as we close out together. Patricia and I also wanted to share a few resources here on this slide that's really using media to explore implicit bias, unconscious beliefs, and earliest messages that we've kind of internalized from our culture. So what we have here from the New York Times are 26 mini films that explore race, bias, and identity. It says with students. We've also utilized that with staff. And it's a really robust resource. Again, 26 mini films, anywhere from like 2 minutes to like 7, that we hope can be useful to all of you moving forward. Also a really fantastic TED Talk that's about 17 minutes called Danger of a Single Story. That is fantastic and highly recommend. And lastly, from NPR, a really great podcast called The Mind of the Village that's really centered on implicit bias. And it talks a lot about kind of the footprint, the thumbprint of our greater culture and how that has impacted all of us. Like no one is immune from implicit bias. We all carry it and in different ways. So we wanted to offer that to all of you. I apologize, we probably don't have time to show this clip, but this is one that's just about 2 minutes long that comes from the 26 mini films that is uncovering implicit bias, and the title is Peanut Butter, Jelly, and Racism. Really powerful, again, for ourselves, our staff, and our students, really thinking about these automatic assumptions that we all carry in the world about race, about gender, sexual orientation, kind of actually pertaining to oftentimes a lot of the social identities that exist. And also here for everyone are a few books that have been really helpful in our work around implicit bias. I'm sure some of you are familiar with these, but we went ahead and put a few on here. Unconscious Bias in Schools, a developmental approach to exploring race and racism. The one in the middle is Blind Spots, Hidden Biases of Good People. That is also, I have the audiobook infographic, but of course you can, if you're like me, I'm old school. I like to kind of read and highlight and tag pages. And then lastly is Whistling Vivaldi, How Stereotypes Affect Us and What We Can Do by Claude Steele. And I think that's a really important one as it thinks about and teaches us about stereotype threat and how real that is for so many of us and our young people. So we'd like us to think through group reflections on how can we work to mitigate and disrupt implicit bias within ourselves, our school system, and work environments. And also, importantly, what are we already doing, right? What have we been doing to dismantle implicit bias within our roles and within our spheres of influence? So I invite folks, if you're feeling up to it, to kind of share some of your ideas in the chat of what you've already been doing. Maybe you've been having staff meetings. Maybe you've checked out things like the Harvard IAT test, which I highly recommend as well. That's a kind of a self-reflection online tool to explore kind of where our own biases lie. But we do invite folks to think through sharing what you've already been doing in our last few minutes together. And also we have our quote reflection here, which I will read. That comes from an African proverb. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. So we kind of started with a quote. We're kind of getting towards the end of our time and wanting to close out with another quote. So starting with Lila Watson and kind of ending with this powerful proverb, thinking about this quote in relation to equity and equitable environments, equitable after school environments. So I do just want to open it up for comments if folks want to come on and speak about the quote or share in the chat, just an invitation. I know we've been sitting for a while and we're getting close to the end, but we do welcome your thoughts or reactions to this particular quote. For me, I guess what comes up is thinking about behaviors that I see or that I'm asked to consult on in schools or in my previous work in hospitals here in Queens, thinking about always kind of what's going on underneath that behavior, right? Shantae is sharing the kids that act out the most are usually crying out for love and attention. Absolutely, right? I couldn't agree more with you. Thinking about that behavior is really communication, right? To the adults. I need something, like my needs are not being met right now, or maybe they're not being met in other parts of my life. So how can we as as people in this world, right, working with young people, work to create environments where there is a sense of deep visibility, being valued, right, a deep sense of connection and belonging. And I think for so many of our young people, they find that in after school spaces. You know, they find that in the programming that we're offering, that we're developing and implementing, right? So thinking about how can we create spaces where young people feel loved and feel tended to, right? As Shantae is saying in this reflection here.
This is Melissa. Can I go?
Yes, thanks, Melissa.
I feel like we just have to be available and present. Sometimes we just go to work and we're just there, just being an extra body. But I feel like we just need to be present, and we need to take into account the things that these children go through. Some of the children that I have come into contact with have been through things that I have never experienced in my 30 years of living. And so I just feel like because they're smaller human beings doesn't mean that they don't have feelings or go through things. So just being available, just being present, I think is super important.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I couldn't agree more with your comment there. Like being present, right? Trying to kind of compartmentalize sometimes, like, well, whatever we have going on, because we're human beings too. So kind of, I know for myself, okay, put this over here. I'll get this, pick this back up later at 5 o'clock. But how am I being really present for this child or for this staff member of mine too, right? We all have things that we're experiencing at the same time. So not judging a behavior, but being more curious about it might serve us, right, as we continue moving forward in the work that we're doing. So in closing, we're going to also share one more quote from Bettina Love. Often people are waiting for a leader to come along. You don't have to wait for someone else. So we love that quote from Bettina Love, and just wanting us to think through perhaps one commitment or action that you will take following the information and the discussion and the awesome discussion in the chat box this morning within your own sphere of influence. So we ask folks to think through that if you're open to sharing. And in just another couple of seconds, I will ask for the attendance one more time, just to make sure we have everyone accounted for with your name in your organization. And after that, we're going to go ahead and send the evaluation link in the chat. And just wanted to, again, thank Patricia, my awesome colleague and facilitator, and Danny, and just to thank all of you for being here this morning with so much going on in the world, within our work scopes. So thanks for being present for this conversation. And we hope you have a really wonderful and safe holiday season ahead. So yes, thank you. Karen is saying checking with staff about non-work things as well as work things. I love that kind of like holistic checking in, right? Really centering the whole person. Yeah, and also I was missing my chat, forgive me. Melissa was sharing, realizing and embracing the differences and how the upbringing may be different for students. Thank you for that. That's one great commitment as well. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'm realizing the time, so feel free to go ahead and have your name and your org. And Danny just put the link there. Danny Ortiz for the evaluation, and she's going to keep dropping it there so everyone has quick access. And as a reminder, you will get a copy of the slides from today. And thanks for your awesome contributions. Hope to see you again at another training.